Assalamu alaikum. Greetings on behalf of the Auliya Council of North America. I'm privileged to have with me today Rachana-ACNA. She is Associate Professor of Religious Studies at Iona University. She's chair of the Religious Studies Department there. And she teaches courses in Islam, Sufism, and sacred music and poetry. Currently, she is also the Iona representative of the Interreligious Coalition of New Rochelle. Dr. Umashankar's research interests are in the anthropology of religion, the politics of religious identity, history and memory in Islam in South Asia. Her PhD dissertation titled Defending Sufism, Defining Islam, Asserting Islamic Identity in India, is based on more than a year of intensive ethnographic fieldwork in India. It examines the adherents of shrine-based Sufism assert their identity as Indian Muslims in the contexts of public debates over religious identity and national belonging in India, and vis-a-vis reformist Muslim critiques of their Islamic beliefs and practices. Today we have Professor Umashankar with us so that she can talk to the young people out there, the students who are just beginning with introductions to Sufism, who may want to know more or who may not know anything at all. And she teaches a course at, at Iona, where she does talk to students like that. And the course is called Sufism, Traditions of Islamic Mysticism. And today I will request her to address our audience, our young audiences, and sort of replicate the same kind of lecture that she gives to her students in class. Welcome, Rachana.
Thank you. Very happy to be here. I guess the question that we're starting with is, what is Sufism? Maybe that's a good place to begin. So Sufism is usually defined as Islamic mysticism. So it might be a good idea to step a few paces back and think about what that word means. What does mysticism mean? What do we mean by mystical practices, mystical traditions? And there, just to be clear, there are mystical traditions in mysticism is a part of pretty much all of the major religious traditions in the world. So you have Jewish mysticism, you have Christian mysticism, you have Hindu mysticism, Islamic mysticism, and every religion. And so we can think about mysticism as a very kind of broad concept, and then each religion brings to this idea of mysticism its own foundations, its own ideas, and so it's the same is true of Islam. You have this concept of mysticism, and then the form that mysticism takes in the Islamic tradition is what we call Sufism. So let's try and understand what mysticism is. At a very basic level, the fundamental premise of mysticism is the relationship between the finite and the infinite. What do I mean by that? So the human being is seen as finite, right? So we have how we experience the world, how we understand the world, is dependent on our senses, whether that's our sense of touch, our sense of taste, smell, sight, hearing, our intellectual capacities, right? These are all ways in which we access the world, the ways in which we experience the world. But our senses have limitations, right? There's a limit to what we can see, there's a limit to what we can hear, there's a limit to what we can comprehend. And that is human finitude, right? The finiteness of the human condition. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, connected to that is the infinite. So God, right, the understanding of God as a finite and as an infinite entity, right? God as, when we say God is infinite, we mean the idea of God having no beginning, no end. God being at all places at all times. God being everything and nothing, right? The infinite has to encompass both zero and everything else. So the idea of God is infinite. So now we have these two things in relationship with each other. You have the finite human being, and then you have an infinite God. So the mystical perspective is that if we try and understand the infinite using our finite capacities, then our understanding of the infinite is necessarily incomplete, right? That the finite, using only its finite capacities, can only access a portion of that which is infinite. And that is the foundational premise, if you wish, the starting point of mystical traditions. And that is the starting point of the Sufi worldview as well, right? The idea that God is infinite, we are finite, and therefore our capacity to understand God, our capacity to understand creation, our capacity to understand the world around us is necessarily limited, right? And so that leads to the universe, right, from the Sufi perspective, to be divided into the known and the unknown, right? So what is the known? The known is that which we have access to using our senses, using our intellectual capacities, using our sense organs, and that is known as the zahir, the apparent world, the obvious, the overt. But the force of the Sufi argument is that the obvious world, the apparent world, is only the tip of the iceberg, right? That we know what we don't know, it far exceeds what we know. And so the unknown, right, that which we don't have access to, that is known as the batin, the hidden, right? That which is not obvious, that which is veiled, that which is beyond our capacity to understand, right? And so the entire enterprise of Sufism over the past 1,400 years, right? The entire history of Sufism is basically the search for a path from the known to the unknown, right? How can the human being understand the divine, right? How can we begin to approach and even approach an understanding of the divine, right? So everything in Sufi philosophy, Sufi ritual practices, Sufi poetry, everything in Sufism is the goal. That is the ultimate goal. Is the the knowledge, the deep knowledge of God, knowledge that is beyond information or fact, right? It's what we call gnosis, a knowledge of the truth, rather than so knowledge, knowledge of truth with a capital T, rather than knowledge of rather than information, if you will, right? These are sort of two different different things. And of course, the ultimate goal, even beyond that, is the idea of, through this deep knowledge of the divine, to then be united with the divine, right? To reach a station of spiritual closeness to the divine, such that one at that point recognizes that there is no truth but God, right? That is the sort of the ultimate goal of Sufism. But that, if to put it very, very briefly,
Yes,
right? That is, kind of these are sort of some of the foundational ideas of Sufism.
So that's very informative and interesting. But I would also like you to perhaps talk a little bit about the places that are associated with Sufis, and how the shrines play a very important role in this whole kind of a world of Sufism, and how it's very difficult to separate one from the other. So if you could just talk about that a little bit. I know you've done a lot of work with shrines.
Sure. I might sneeze, little allergies. Right. So Sufism, actually, we can think about Sufism as having two strands. There's what I call shrine-based Sufism and what I call order-based Sufism. So let's start with order-based Sufism, and then I'll move to shrine-based Sufism. So order-based Sufism is formal Sufism, right? What we would call tasawwuf. And order-based Sufism is the formal, ritualized aspect of Sufism, where at the core of a Sufi orders are basically generational institutions, similar to but not the same as monastic orders in Catholicism. Again, similar to but not the same as, in that they're formalized. At the core of a Sufi order is a master-disciple relationship. A Sufi master will have any number of disciples, and once a Sufi master feels that he or she has taught everything that they could possibly teach to their students, they might pick one or two of their students to go on to become Sufi masters in their own right, and set up their own Sufi lodges and gather their own disciples, and so on and so forth. So that's the master-disciple relationship moving forward. But moving back in time, every Sufi order is a chain of master-disciple relationships that eventually traces its spiritual lineage to the figure of the Prophet Muhammad. So historically speaking, the Prophet Muhammad is considered to be the first Sufi master. And primordially speaking, Adam is considered to be the first Sufi master, right? The first human being as the first Sufi master. But historically speaking, in terms of traceable lineage, the Prophet Muhammad is considered the first Sufi master. And after the Prophet Muhammad, Ali and Abu Bakr are considered the two first disciples of the Prophet Muhammad. Most Sufi orders trace the master-disciple relationship back to the figure of the Prophet Muhammad through the figure of Ali. But one Sufi order traces its descent, again, spiritual descent, not biological descent, traces that master-disciple link to the Prophet Muhammad through the figure of Abu Bakr, and that's the Naqshbandiya Sufi order. But aside from them, it is through the figure of Hazrat Ali that you get to the figure of the Prophet Muhammad. So you have throughout the world, or throughout 1,000, 300, 400-year history of Islam, you have the development of numerous Sufi orders in different parts of the world, where the teachings of particular Sufi masters or particular Sufi saints can start kind of a new Sufi order or a new sub-order in a particular lineage. So that's order-based Sufism, where disciples seek out Sufi masters to be formally trained in Sufi traditions and rituals of meditation, of contemplation, with, again, that ultimate goal being, it is hoped for, right, understanding of the divine and oneness with God, right? But that is a formal, institutionalized aspect of Sufism. What you asked was, is the other aspect of Sufism, which is the popular form of Sufism. And the popular form of Sufism I call shrine-based Sufism. And that's the kind of Sufism that is centered on the shrines, the shrine complexes of Sufi saints. So Sufi saints are basically charismatic figures who are also considered Sufi masters, who a reputation grows around them either during their lifetime or after their death, that this is a person who is spiritually elevated. This is a person who has deep wisdom and insight into the divine. And that when this person passes, this person will be one with God. This person will be united with God. And on the death of a Sufi saint, the tomb of the Sufi saint then becomes a locus of spiritual practice. There is a belief that because the Sufi saint has achieved oneness with God, that they are wali Allah, they are friends of God, and there's belief in the intercessory powers of the saint. That is the idea that God uses the saints as an instrument to help the common people. Right? So that is what the Sufi shrine is. And Sufi shrines, you find Sufi shrines all over the world, including the United States, actually. But
Could
yes.
you mention some of the ones in India and perhaps in Pakistan?
Yeah, sure.
And the ones that are most popular or most well known.
Yeah. So my personal research, for my my PhD, I did divided my field work at two Sufi shrines, one in North India, the shrine of Nizamuddin Auliya, which is a very, very popular Sufi shrine in Delhi. And the other shrine that I did my research at was the shrine of Khaja Banda Nawaz Gesudaraz, which is in Karnataka, in Deccan, South Central India. Both of these shrines are part of the Chishti Sufi order. That is, both of these Sufi saints, Khaja Banda Nawaz and Nizamuddin Auliya, were part of the Chishti order of Sufis. Chishti Sufism is perhaps the most popular form of Sufism in India. So the shrines of Moinuddin Chishti in Ajmer is perhaps the most historically and religiously significant Sufi shrine in India. In Pakistan, Sehwan Sharif is a major Sufi hub, which is in Sehwan, in Sindh, in Sindh. So yeah, you do have these. Oh, and I should also mention that West Africa is a huge center of Sufism as well, and the city of Touba in Senegal also has a major Sufi shrine. And the Sufi order in Senegal, the most sort of significant one is the order of Sheikh Amadou Bamba, who's a West African Sufi saint from actually the turn of the century, 19th, 20th century Sufi saint. But yeah.
So I wish we had more time, because there's much more to know and to learn and to talk of. But we will continue our series. And thank you so much, Rachana, for being with us today. And we will continue to ask Rachana to speak with us every now and then. But for now, it's Khuda Hafiz. We'll see you again.